Breaking news tonight, rising tensions in the skies. The U.S. accusing Russia of downing one of its drones near Ukraine. A Russian fighter jet allegedly striking the unmanned U.S. drone in international airspace over the Black Sea. The U.S. military calling it reckless. What the Kremlin is saying, and how will the U.S. respond? Also tonight, states of emergency as two major storms slam the east and west coasts. The powerful nor'easter bringing more than a foot of snow to the northeast. Treacherous travel. In New York, one plane making a bumpy landing, another rolling off the taxiway. In Minnesota, a mall roof collapsing under snow. The West Coast braced for more catastrophic floods. The dramatic rescues were tracking it all. President Biden signing a new executive order on guns, what it does for background checks. New fallout from the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. The Justice Department and SEC now launching investigations. Did bank executives unload stock before the collapse? Yet another close call on the runway, this time near Washington, D.C. My exclusive with the acting chief of the FAA. I asked him, why do these near misses seem to be happening so often? And the bakery helping young chefs rise to their full potential and inspiring America.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We'll get to that major weather news in a few moments, but first we want to bring you the latest and what we know about a dangerous aerial encounter in the sky today between the United States and Russia. The Pentagon saying a Russian fighter jet poured fuel on an unmanned American drone, then collided with it over the Black Sea. It sent the American aircraft into the water. The confrontation escalating already high tensions between the countries, which are telling different versions of today's event. Courtney Kuby has the latest for us from the Pentagon.
The stunning showdown happening over the Black Sea near Ukraine and Russia when an unmanned American drone like this one, called a Reaper, was confronted by two Russian fighter jets, weaving dangerously close to it, dumping fuel on the U.S. drone and then colliding with it, the Russian jet's wing striking the Reaper's propeller. After the collision, the U.S. downed the $32 million drone in the Black Sea, first blacking out its software to keep classified information out of Russian hands, the Pentagon describing the Russian actions as reckless.
Based on the actions of the Russian pilots, it's clear that it was unsafe, unprofessional. And I think the actions speak for themselves.
The Pentagon says the drone was conducting a routine intelligence gathering mission in international airspace when the intercept occurred.
It was in international airspace, over international water.
The Russians disagreed, insisting the U.S. drone was in their established airspace near Crimea and that the Russian jet did not come into contact with the drone. Late tonight, the U.S. summoning the Russian ambassador to object to the Russian pilot's actions. The U.S. is working through options to recover the drone, but without U.S. ships in the Black Sea, the reality is the Russians can reach the wreckage before the U.S. can.
And Courtney, we know the Pentagon has some video of this incident.
Lester, yeah, they're not releasing it publicly at this point. And while this incident is now over, what U.S. officials here tell me they're concerned about is future confrontation, even with an unmanned drone that could lead to a military response and then even possibly an actual conflict. Lester?
All right, Courtney Kuby leading us off tonight. Thank you. And a late season blast is pummeling parts of the Northeast while another atmospheric river drenches California. The nor'easter bringing with it heavy snow and dangerous winds here in the east, knocking out power to thousands. Travel conditions have been treacherous for drivers skidding off the road and making for some rough rides in the air. While in the west, fast-moving floodwaters making for harrowing rescues. Emily Ikeda has the latest.
With fierce winds, snow, and rain, tonight the season's first nor'easter is bulldozing through more than a dozen states. And after a mostly mild winter, it's delivering a brutal blow.
We've been waiting for a big snow like this at least to come, so here it is.
Snowfall reaching double digits in Leominster, Wilmington, and Rowe, while whipping winds were the problem along the coast. Gusts expected to reach up to 55 miles an hour in Boston. The dangerous combination snapping tree branches and knocking out power to several 100,000 people across the region. Flight cancellations soaring in the face of the storm. Watch this plane's bumpy landing caught on camera in Rochester. While further east in Syracuse, a Delta plane exited one of the taxiways with 61 passengers on board, according to airport officials.
All southside taxiways are covered with snow. Braking actions 4 reported by vehicle.
From the runway to roadway, treacherous travel conditions led to this bus crash in Massachusetts. Toppled a tree onto this plow truck, landing 2 people in the hospital in Connecticut, and sent tractor trailers sliding in New Hampshire.
The snow is so thick and oh God, it's terrible.
After a weekend snowstorm in Minnesota, employees scrambled to safety today when a mall roof collapsed. And across the country, a 1-2 punch as another storm funnels rain and snow to an already waterlogged California. 26 million people there facing flood alerts. Overnight, remarkable rescues from rushing waters. Firefighters say they pulled 11 people to safety in Los Angeles County.
Fortunately, we don't know about the water coming down and how strong it can be.
Bi-coastal threats bearing down in the final days of winter.
Yeah, and Emily, looking back here in the east, any sense of when power will be restored? It is quite cold in a lot of these spots.
Lester, there are more than 250,000 households in the Northeast without power tonight. And while we expect this snowfall to taper off overnight, these strong, powerful wind gusts will linger through tomorrow afternoon. That makes it even more difficult for utility workers to restore power and could mean even more downed power lines. Lester?
Emily and Keta, thank you. Bill Cairns is tracking these storms on both coasts. Bill, when will the effects of this nor'easter pass?
Not till tomorrow afternoon, Lester. Good evening. We are watching this storm still producing some areas of heavy snow. A lot of it has already fallen, but the winds are still going to crank as we go throughout the overnight hours. We'll have additional power outages. This snow was like cement on the trees. It was just hard and wet, and with the winds blowing, it's going to bring down some more trees. We still have about 28 million people under wind alerts and some wind warnings, especially from Boston up the coast of Portland, where tonight the winds will howl in that 50-mile-per-hour range. And the area of concern tonight in Southern California for that atmospheric river is from Santa Barbara to Los Angeles and the mountains outside of L.A. It is going to rain hard, much harder tonight than it did with the last atmospheric river. We could see anywhere between 2 to 5 inches of rain in Southern California, which is a big deal by Southern California standards. So unfortunately, more flooding and devastation is possible tonight.
Yeah, sorry to see it. All right, Bill, thanks very much. 2 months after that mass shooting in Monterey Park, California, President Biden has signed an executive order in that city aimed at strengthening enforcement of existing gun background checks. Beforehand, the president greeted Brandon Say, who bravely disarmed the gunman who shot and killed 11 people at a dance hall during a Lunar New Year celebration. There's new fallout after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Federal investigators are now looking into actions by bank executives before the collapse. Jake Ward has details.
Silicon Valley Bank now under federal investigation. NBC News confirming with multiple sources the Department of Justice, along with the Securities and Exchange Commission, have launched probes looking at, among other things, stock sales made by company executives before the bank collapsed. This has caused grow in Washington for renewed bank regulation and accountability.
I do think that certainly the profits from the sales by the owner should be clawed back because we're going to have to be raising fees on banks in order to pay for the uninsured depositors at this bank and other banks.
And today, despite several smaller regional banks bouncing back in the stock market, Moody's announced a downgraded outlook for the U.S. banking sector as a whole. How healthy are other small institutions like Silicon Valley Bank? Analysts say we will not know the fundamentals until a Federal Reserve report provides a look at combined balance sheets 2 weeks from Friday.
The stocks are absolutely not a reliable indicator. In 2 weeks, we'll know if there's a big outflow or not. But that's the next kind of scheduled data point that we'll get.
Just before its collapse, Silicon Valley Bank blamed its troubles on elevated cash burn from its mostly tech-focused clients. Now the concern is in part whether other regional banks are exposed to similar risk. Today, the pullback in the tech sector continued with Facebook parent company Meta's announcement it would eliminate 15,000 jobs following 11,000 layoffs at the company in November.
Now, on top of all this, today we learned inflation has fallen to 6%. That makes for a complicated economic picture as the Federal Reserve prepares to meet next week. Many economists are now asking if the Fed will hit pause on further rate increases. Lester?
All right, Jake, thanks very much. Almost 6 weeks after that train disaster in Ohio, the state sued Norfolk Southern today, saying it recklessly endangered people's health. Ohio's attorney general said he is seeking compensation for damages to the environment, economy, and residents. Norfolk Southern says it's working to create several long-term funds to help East Palestine. We turn now to concerning questions about air safety that have rattled some flyers recently, and my exclusive interview with Billy Nolan, the acting head of the FAA. We spoke about a string of near collisions on runways, the most recent just last week, as the agency convenes an air safety summit tomorrow. At airports across the country, alarms are being raised over dangerous near misses. From the runway at Austin Bergstrom Airport, where a controller cleared a FedEx 767 cargo jet to land on the same runway that a Southwest 737 full of passengers was taking off from, just 75 feet from disaster.
Southwest aboard, FedEx is on the go.
To an unsettling close call at Boston's Logan Airport, where a Learjet pilot took off without clearance as a JetBlue flight was landing on a crossing runway. And now NBC News has learned of another near disaster last week at Reagan National, where a regional jet pilot rolled in front of a departing United Airbus jet.
Oh, United 2003, Kansas takeoff clearance. We're boarding takeoff, United 2003.
All among the recent close calls that led FAA Acting Administrator Billy Nolan to call for tomorrow's safety summit. Some of the headlines are downright scary. Is flying safe right now?
Lester, I can say to you, to your audience, to the American people, that flying is absolutely safe. We have the safest, most complex system in the world. We work at it every day, and it is absolutely safe.
Why is this summit so important right now?
We've had these events over the past few weeks that gives us a moment to say, let's stop, let's reflect, let's ask ourselves the question, are we missing anything? Is there anything that we should be doing different? And remind ourselves always that we can never become complacent and never take this incredible safety record for granted.
Are we seeing more of these, or is this what you would describe as a cluster?
I would describe it as a cluster. We've seen over this last few months more than you'd expect to see. Maybe you have an average of 1 or 2 per month.
I will kill every man on this plane.
And then there are the concerns about what's happening on board.
The FAA has zero tolerance for unruly behavior. And we will indeed use every tool, every resource at our disposal where someone interferes with a cabin or cockpit crew member. We will go for civil penalties and federal prosecution where warranted. My suggestion to you is to stay home, because if you act up in flight, we're going to come after you.
With airports full for spring break and the summer travel season not far away, Nolan insists the FAA is prepared as they seek to avoid a repeat of last summer's meltdown.
Flying has come back with a vengeance, so to speak. Our goal is to make sure that we're proactive and where we can be, to be as predictive as we can be to make sure that our demand matches up.
Part of my conversation with the acting head of the FAA, Billy Nolan. In 60 seconds, the surge in car thefts topping 1 million for the first time in years. The top model is being stolen, and why some officials are saying car makers need to do much more. The EPA today proposed the first ever limits on so-called forever chemicals in drinking water. The toxic chemicals, also known as PFAS, have been used in manufacturing for decades. They don't break down in the environment, and experts say they can cause a host of health issues. The EPA says the proposed limits would save thousands of lives. Also tonight, car thefts are surging nationwide, more than 1 million in 2022 alone. Now some cities are so fed up they're taking the auto giants to court. Maggie Vespa with more on that and the cars that have become top targets for thieves.
Tonight, American car thieves capping a banner year.
Just got my car back from being stolen,
leaving a staggering number of drivers stalled.
This is what they did to my car.
A new report shows car thefts nationwide are surging, topping 1 million last year. In Chicago, up 55%.
You feel helpless.
Thieves stole Teresa McKinney's car in June. Investigators found it a day later, only to have the steering wheel fall off.
My car has not been right since it's been stolen. It don't drive right. It don't do nothing right.
Police pushing steering wheel locks and parking in secured areas.
As for what's driving this, researchers say on the list of most stolen makes, 2 have become frequent targets.
Y'all be aware of this new Kia and Hyundai break-in challenge.
On TikTok, tricks for hot wiring Hyundais and Kias have become a viral trend. Now the automakers facing federal lawsuits with multiple cities alleging Hyundai and Kia failed to install adequate anti-theft technology in certain models, causing thefts to soar.
This has spread so quickly. It's just frustrating because this is something that's easily preventable. The technology has been there for years.
Both companies offering free upgrades to security software, adding their cars are in compliance with federal safety standards.
Kia adding it's deeply concerned about this trend. Hyundai says it's committed to the security of its customers. Lester.
Maggie Vespa, thank you. Coming up, the dangerous new drug ravaging some communities. Our series One Nation Overdosed is next. Back now with our series One Nation Overdosed, an alarming look at the rise of the newest drug wreaking havoc in a major U.S. city. Dasha Burns reports, and we do want to caution you, some of the images in this story are disturbing.
The Kensington neighborhood of Philadelphia for decades has been an epicenter of the nation's drug crisis, according to the Department of Justice.
This is the infamous K&A.
But the supply in the largest open-air drug market on the eastern seaboard has become even more dangerous, evolving from heroin to the more potent fentanyl. And now those drugs laced with xylazine, a large animal sedative commonly referred to as tranq.
You're not screaming like before. That's a plus sign.
The city is rolling out wound treatment vans to combat the effects of tranq. Believed to prolong the effects of fentanyl, it also causes deep wound infections on the user's body, eroding away human flesh and sometimes leading to amputation of infected limbs.
He comes every day. Today he will take care of this leg.
Nurse Mercy Varghese says what we saw here was mild.
Some of them come with both hands from here to here.
Raquel Fetzer is in recovery from heroin addiction. Sober since 2016, she runs the mobile wound care program.
When you were using compared to what you see now, how different is it?
It's very, very different. A bag of heroin would hold me 6 to 8 hours. Now people are going into withdrawal within 2 to 3 hours.
Many users don't want tranq, but
there is no fentanyl that doesn't have tranq in it.
Traveling through Kensington, we met Eric Taylor when he asked police for treatment for his wounds.
When you're in pain, it makes you more likely to use because you want to relieve the pain.
2021 was a record year for overdose deaths in Philadelphia. That same year, 90% of opioid samples that the health department tested from the street supply contained xylazine.
How significant of an issue is xylazine right now?
I would say it's probably our biggest challenge right now.
Doctors are finding conventional wound care treatments are not effective and don't know how to treat the dependence on tranq.
We don't have a medical detoxification best practice yet in place for it because, again, it wasn't something meant for human consumption.
The FDA has taken action to restrict the unlawful entry of xylazine into the country, citing concern about the increasing prevalence of xylazine mixed with illicit drugs.
How much should people be sounding the alarm right now?
I think everybody should absolutely be sounding the alarm. The movement, similar to what we saw with fentanyl, is that it will be in every other substance.
A deadly cycle turning deadlier. Dasha Burns, NBC News, Philadelphia.
And we'll take a short break. Up next, we'll visit a bakery that creates recipes for success and is inspiring America. Finally, you might say they're baking a difference in the lives of young chefs in the making. Our Kate Snow explains.
It's a busy day for the crew at Rising Above Bakery in Nyack, New York.
How many cookies do you want?
21-year-old Connor Carson likes being part of a team.
What do you bake now?
I'm baking breads, cookies, scones.
Got it. All right, tell me when it's ready.
Founder Sherry Raveni Ulrich was an avid baker and speech therapist who noticed years ago when she baked cookies with her students with special needs, they lit up.
They found their voice in the kitchen. It was just beautiful.
So during COVID, she started a bakery in her own house.
This oven was in your dining room?
Yes.
For a long time?
Yes.
This January, they finally moved to a temporary storefront, employing young adults with developmental disabilities, supported by volunteers.
What's the idea? To give them a meaning, to wake up in the morning and say, I want to go to work. I want to be as important as anyone else.
I'm going to take the glaze that's already done here.
Luke Garrison showed me how to make a maple glaze.
I do make mistakes.
Everybody makes mistakes.
But I grow and learn from them.
It's just so much harder.
Lisa Carson is Connor's mom and serves on the bakery's board.
The minute he walked in the door, what he brought to the table was valued. They really saw him for who he was.
Rising Above Bakery won't have this space much longer. The nonprofit is raising money, hoping to secure a permanent storefront.
What do you like about working here, Connor?
Being seen, I think, is the most important thing.
Being seen?
Being seen. So that means, like, I think, like having customers come in and see how we can work together.
Do you think this place has kind of changed your life?
I think it did, yes. It really opened my eyes to see who I am.
And that is the sweetest recipe of all. Kate Snow, NBC News, Nyack, New York.
Boy, it sure is. That's Nightly News for this Tuesday. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
Take care.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.